people in power position in terms of also podcasting and visibilizing women human rights defenders' story is Nyambura Mundia from Usawa. Let's give her a round of applause. So before we start, I would want at least we know who is in the room. What kind of work do they do? And the kind of conversations that we want to go to dive in. Not that we want to give a lecture, but we are here to build a collective movement and strengthen the existing movement that we all belong in terms of ensuring we have a strong civic space for women human rights defenders who are organizing, for human rights defenders who are organizing, but also for the leader of different sectors that are all represented in East Africa. And we start here. Say your name, the work you do, and the organization you represent. Is that okay? Can I get some energy? Can you get some energy for Kikao?
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Maria. I'm a human rights defender, and I used to work with Jacinta and Rachel in Mathare, and I hope they'll welcome me back into their fold.
Good morning. I'm Ruth Juliet Ochieng from Kibera. I represent Feminists for Peace, Rights and Justice Center. I'm a feminist, I'm a human rights defender, and my key concern is on matters of women and girls here.
Morning everyone. I'm Jacinta Agunja from Coalition for Grassroots Human Rights Defenders Kenya. The work we do is on women and girls' rights, SHR rights, and unpacking feminism in a local context and movement building. We are based in Mathare.
Morning, everyone. My name is Morina Kinyi. Preferred name is Petite. Born and raised in Kibra. Still living in Kibera. Working with adolescent girls and young mothers in a line of reproductive health and financial literacy education. Thank you.
Women power, pussy power. My name is Lydia Karaoke. My preferred name is Queen Africa. I come from Kiambu County. I usually deal with women in environment and environmental, and also advocate about children.
Women power. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Adija Ali. I'm from Dandora. Preferred name is Saida Babes. Saida Babes. I usually work with women, entrepreneurship, and also adolescent girls.
Good morning everyone. My name is Habu Dorcas. I'm from Kangemi. Working with peasant women from the rural areas, especially those who deal with agroecology.
Good morning. I am Angela Wangeshi. I work with the Institute for Social Accountability. You can call us TISA. I am also an advocate of good governance, because that's what we do in TISA. We also coordinate the Okoa Uchumi campaign. So our main agenda is to advocate for fiscal justice. And so we work, apart from working with the government as our stakeholder, we also work with women in informal trade. We also advocate for issues around AGPO. So generally, good governance, fiscal justice, and I'm glad to be part of this conversation today.
Good morning. My names are Petronila Mukaindo. I am from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. This is a constitutional commission under the Constitution, of course. We deal with all human rights, for all people, the promotion and protection of all human rights, working with government, working with non-state actors. Very privileged to be here. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning again. My name is Elizabeth Kamundia. I work at Human Rights Watch with Tirana and Alan here, and Gloria and other colleagues I see around the room. I'm the Deputy Director of the Disability Rights Division, and we investigate, expose, and advocate for change in terms of human rights violations across a broad range of issues, including women's rights issues. So really, really happy to see all of you here this morning.
Good morning. My name is Benson. I work with Radio France. I report on human rights. Thank you.
Good morning.
Mwangi, a community organizer with Mathare Social Justice Center, and I run Dada Talks campaign.
Hey everyone, my name is Justine. I am a stand-up comedian, a human rights activist online, I think. I'm not sure. I mostly advocate for everyday issues using my comedy on my channel, Fake Walk with Justine, and I'm glad to be here.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Jambi. I'm the founder and CEO of Wakilisha Initiative. We promote access to justice for children in conflict with the law. And I'm happy to be here.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Muriuki, and I work for TISA. My colleague Angela here has already introduced our organization, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Dorcas Kitonga. I represent KELIN in this meeting. KELIN is Kenya Ethical Legal Issues Network on HIV and AIDS. We advocate for health-related human rights for all. Our main aim is to see Article 43 on the right to health realized. Thank you for inviting us, and it's a pleasure.
Good morning. I'm Andrea. I'm from Spain, and I'm a journalist in Agencia F, which is a international news agency.
Good morning. My name is Zaina Kombo, an advocate, a woman human rights defender, and currently working on campaigns at Amnesty Kenya.
Good morning. My name is Fleria Catherine Atieno. I am a law student at Kenyatta University, and I'm also currently working under Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I'm feeling very happy to be here.
Hello everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm currently working at Internews on internet freedom, but I've had the pleasure of working with Rachel for the Pussy Power Festival and also at the Human Rights Watch, so it's a pleasure to be here.
I think, is there anybody who haven't introduced themselves?
I think no. So it's only my panelists, but the way I say it, relax, no stress. These are conversation and a dialogue, and they are very key things I'll want us to unpack. Huh? We are women human rights defenders. We are creatives, we are activists, we are leaders of institutions that we lead, we are sexual reproductive health and rights activists, we are people leading into big organizations. Having our colleagues and our comrades here in this space from Human Rights Watch, let us not see them as the only people in power, but how do we collectively put our efforts together to protect our own space? Because it's under threat, right? So I'd like to throw in questions that we are able to unpack also for Tarani to know the realities of the lived
experience of activists in the ground. And for them, when they're also responding, Gloria also will focus on the protection perspective, being and working with organizations also that are supporting activists. How does it look like, and being a woman leader? And Alan, as an ally and supporter of women, activists and working at Human Rights Watch, we want to hear also from your side, when you hear from the activists, what can we do better collectively? Mundia, from your podcast perspective, because our voices have to go digital spaces, true or false? We are saying nowadays things are moved to digital. We are the millennials, we are the Gen Zs. How does it look like for the opportunity in online? So I want to throw it back to us. With the current civic space and looking in terms of East Africa, where we are seeing the rights that we have had before going low, where we are seeing even governments that are gagging out the right of activists. You have seen the anti-homosexuality bill in Uganda that has split over into Kenya, where we are seeing people like Kelin also working on sexual reproductive health and rights and LGBTQ, these rights being targeted. We are seeing activists going to protest on rights to protest being a bigger issue. We are seeing in Uganda and Tanzania, and where Maria, you'll give us an input with the current state of Tanzania. How does it look like? Zaina, Amnesty, you work on inequality and discrimination. What has been the current trend going? So I'm throwing it back to us, human rights activists. What is the current state of human rights defending in the country? For you as a human rights defender. Anyone who wants to go first? Swahili is allowed, eh? And by them respecting your time, by the time we are 12, we are done. That's how.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I'm not sure if everybody can see me, but I'll stand here. Oops, sorry. I think when it comes to Tanzania, one of the biggest challenges that we have is what started in a couple of years back, what we have called lawfare. That is when the state decides to wage a war with human rights activists and the civil society using the law. So there has been a very rapid deterioration of the situation, whereby they've legalized, detention without bail. They legalized going after people with very little proof, and also suspending the way civil society organizations work and many other things. This has had a chilling effect on activities, but also on a lot of freedoms, including the freedom of expression. So for human rights defenders, there's been a two-tiered attack. The first attack is on more formal, which is on the institutions. And that has been very difficult because it cripples you, you're unable to function, you live in fear that whether your activity that you're doing is going to adhere to the standard that they've now reset, and they brought a whole different rules for that. The other thing is, which is a more personal way, is whereby they will go after you for saying something or for tweeting something. You talked about the digital space. There's been a lot of aggressive moves against freedom of expression on digital space. And that has meant that commenting on the page of a politician, something very banal, like you can comment on the page of a politician and say, I don't like you, or I think you're stupid, and then that can be interpreted that you actually are engaged in sedition or something really criminal. So one of the things that is very important to understand when it comes to the context of Tanzania, it was the first African country in 2015 to introduce the cybercrime law, which was so flawed that at that time, some of us were already very active in the digital space. We said that they're criminalizing gossip. So you could get a criminal charge, and they called it a cyber crime if, for example, they said you spread fake news, but that fake news could be something as banal as asking, is this politician really sick? Or when we had President Magufuli suddenly disappear, and we asked, where is Magufuli? Some of us were threatened that why are you asking that question, and that could become a crime. So these are the things that some of the institutions, but some of the individuals that they face. But I think it's more difficult for women who take on a lot of risk. We've had a specific movement which we call the Shangazi, which means auntie, the Shangazi movement. It has been directed against women who have stood up in the face of all this repression. And some of us have paid a bigger price in many ways, taking into consideration that many women are usually, caretakers of the family. People depend on them. So you find that even the slightest attack that goes against a woman, it becomes more difficult not to speak about. Then you get stigmatized by the entire society. So I think that the situation is definitely not better because, as I said at the beginning, the lawfare is still there. Until we see the repeal of all those repressive laws that were brought in, I think there are about 20 to 30 repressive laws that were brought in. If these are not repealed or amended, then we will continue to be living at the mercy of the existing government. Whether they like you or not, they will decide whether they can come after you or not legally. Thank you.
Hi. So I'll speak from the human rights space targeting sexual reproductive health and rights in the country. So I think the first thing to say is that in as much as we are here, we are doing a lot of work to advocate for these rights, the anti-rights movement is working twice as hard, and they are gaining even more influence to decision-making people, yeah? So that in as much as we are working here, they are on the other side pushing. So I'll give one example. Recently, the Director of Health, with support from NGOs who advocate for sexual reproductive health and rights, developed some guidelines. It's called the Big 5 Causes of Maternal Mobility and Mortality and Morbidity. So the whole idea of that guideline is to guide healthcare professionals on how to reduce the number of deaths arising from maternal, issues. And one of the major causes out of the Big 5, because research was done, was unsafe abortions. So the guidelines addressed how healthcare professionals can reduce that. So the guidelines went, and now it was at the launching stage. But the anti-rights movement went, wrote letters to the CS Health, and unfortunately the launch was cancelled. So the guidelines, as at now, have not been put in place, which is unfortunate, that we are trying so hard to reduce maternal deaths, to ensure that sexual reproductive health and rights for women are realized. But on the other side, they come and say, Kelin is giving a wrong interpretation of the law regarding safe abortion, etc., etc. So it's quite unfortunate in that instance. The second instance, I'd say, is what you mentioned about what's happening in Uganda. The Swahili face. Mwenzako akinyolewa, yako nalitia maji. So clearly that is also happening in the country. I hope this is a safe space to talk about such issues. The Kaluma bill, which is not yet tabled in Parliament, and I know Kelin, together with other CSOs, we tried to really lobby for CSOs to send out protest letters to the Speaker of the very anti-rights, the rights that we're talking about. It is a possibility that that law could come to pass. We work strongly in Nakuru County. One of our greatest grassroots persons in Nakuru County went to the media and really said, Kaluma. The following day, his phone was blocked. You couldn't call him. His emails were blocked. You couldn't reach him on email. His staff were being physically followed, like they would walk and then people are following them behind. So that affects you as a human rights defender. In as much as we are very strong in wanting to advocate for these rights, some people who are not as strong-hearted as we are here can easily give up and say they are not working on this. So I feel like that's a shrinking space. On the other hand, some issues are quite progressive. We have seen Millie Odhiambo present the Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill to Parliament, which seeks to bring in surrogacy as a matter of law and entrench how that is done. So I feel like on one hand, if it matters, abortion matters, and homosexuality, no one wants to hear about it. When it comes to now matters ART, assisted reproductive technology, people are a bit more. I know there was some talks before because that ART bill was being refused because they were saying we are trying to ensure homosexual people start families. But I think Millie, in her wisdom, tried to rework the meaning of who a couple is to be man and woman, and I think that's why it's being more acceptable. So there's a shrinking space, but still we have to acknowledge that there are a few gains, and we hope to keep working on this space to ensure that we can keep having the gains.
Who wants to go next?
So at Amnesty, we are seeing the shrinking civic spaces in both socio-economic and civil and political rights. So the attack on human rights is not just one-sided, it is intersectional, it is becoming more challenging, complex. We keep hearing of the discriminatory practices that are ongoing, despite the fact that it is not yet an act. I'm talking about the Family Protection Bill. We are experiencing the heat waves from the already enacted hate laws from Uganda. We are seeing a massive influx of refugees. We recently launched, this year we've done 2 reports, one on the refugees in Kakuma, saying that Kakuma is not yet safe, and this is specifically for the LGBTQ refugees. We've done another report on NHIF, highlighting the inequalities that exist in the health insurance sector, and especially the National Hospital Insurance Fund, highlighting the cost implications and how services are not being delivered, even when people are compliant and paying the premiums. So we have a lot of work. We have a lot of work. I'm not sure if I want to say for all these 5 years. I'm hoping not. I hope that at one point the government will listen to its people and surely rectify, because we are not yet 1 year, but we are seeing a downward trend in terms of human rights and the gains that we fought for the last decade or 2. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope people in power are able to hear this kind of trends that are coming up. Maybe also to throw in, I know we also have grassroots women human rights defenders that are founders of organization. What's your realities working in the ground? What are your realities? What are your challenges? What are the opportunities? Is the space shrinking in the national level, or but also grassroots?
Okay, I'll talk in the perspective of a local woman working at the grassroots level. For me, I feel like we have threats from all over. Because one, you don't have protection, you work where you live, and then on the LGBTIQ issues, during March and April, our office in Mathare, we closed this because of the attacks, both online and offline. And the narrative which was going around, it's like we are recruiting kids to be LGBTQ, and it moved, that narrative moves because where we work, it's a patriarchal system and structure. That's one thing. Another thing we advocate for is safe abortion, but when you come to where we work, people perceive safe abortion, it's like killing because of the religious and the cultural beliefs of where we work. So those are the issues mostly we work with, which we get backlash each and every time. And another thing, like when you explain to people, giving them the factual information, there are other forces like the oppositions. They use men to run their narrative, because when most of the time men decide what women bodies should do, not the women body. Where I come from, men decide when to give birth, how many kids to give birth. And abortion is not one of the things being discussed on the informal settlements. So those are the issues, even the police. Because when maybe you have a case of rape and defilement, you go and maybe they don't take the action like it's supposed to be taken, you're already marked. So they will just find you during the demonstrations and they will attack back because they know you are the voice of the voiceless. So that's one way of silencing people who are already talking for the voice of the voiceless. And when you are attacked or your kids is being attacked, it demoralizes you. Not most of the people come back to continue defending their rights, because if you are attacked personally, you get demoralized. So that is one of the issues, most of the issues that we face as grassroots activists and feminists.
But I love to push you a bit, out of love. I don't know, is it because we have come to Baraza, people are very, very proper in terms of, can you make it for Tiran and the rest of the team understand, how do you feel when you get this attacked as a woman human rights defender? Because also there's this perspective we are seeing, the gap within the space, not having more young women human rights defenders as leaders of human rights NGOs, as leaders of social movements. How does it affect you when you operate in this environment that is very toxic, that is very patriarchal, that is very demanding, even for those who have had families? And I remember you said, when you go to protest, even your kids are victimized. Can you make it from your own lived experience? Let's put a back and say, this is the work, but these are, I feel as Rachel, for example, when community expects I be an ambulance 24/7 and not resting. Can you make it that way? Can we try? Are we willing to do that? Please let's make it happen.
Like Rachel said, I'll give a personal experience, because most of the time when we are fighting for rights, most of the time you go to the streets, because that's the way we feel like government will hear us, because maybe we don't have the potential of writing the memos and everything that big organizations do. So for us, we resort to going to the streets. So it has a negative perspective, especially for parents who have their kids in government primary schools or secondary. Because it was 2 years ago, I got a backlash from the school. Like when they see your kids, even if they are wrong, your kids will always carry the blame. And if you go and ask what's happening, they'll say like, no, your kids is okay. And when you are gone, they'll start telling your kids nasty things like your mom is always on the street fighting for wrong people in the society. So you see, when that happens, your kids come and start asking you personal questions. Like what did they mean by wrong people in the community? So you see, they put your kid at a spotlight each and every time. So even if there's something wrong in the school, even you are scared of going there, because your kids will always be victimized because of you. And when they need somebody to fight for their own rights, they'll usually call you, like, there's somebody building around the school, they are doing bad things, and then you have to mobilize people to come and get maybe that building out of the school compound or on the fence of the school. But when it comes to something else, they'll always victimize your kids at school. For that, I was so demoralized. Even Rachel told me, like, no, we are supposed to call like media to come and take over that issue. So most of the women go through a lot because it's their kids who always gets attacked. Because when your kid is being attacked, you are directly attacked. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm from Kibera, and my personal experiences of the attacks are that in April, I was in a meeting, and during that meeting, there was another meeting for the political parties, what do we call them? The government. and our photos were being shared out without our consent, propagating that we were in the meeting, that we were supporting the end of the maandamanos here in Kenya. And considering the fact that we are from Kibera, and Kibera is mostly Raila's zone, we are not supposed to be in that place because the president was convening their meeting there. So with that, our photos were shared out to various groups saying that our ED has been organizing, sending people to the president's meeting to come and end the demonstration. And considering that, we knew that with that we could be physically attacked, and with that we got even threats that our shop, because we have an economic project shop, and our shop was, there were plans to attack the shop and burn it down. So before we got the information, before that could be done, these individuals, because they are the gatekeepers of the community, they are vigilante groups in the community, they attacked our ED at her own safe space, confronting her with the false information, and that they were going to attack us and ensure that we do not continue doing our work in the community. And we look at these issues and just intersect these issues. Why do they want to attack us? It's because of the kind of work we do. We are here to advocate, to voice up for the women's rights and girls' rights. But this has not been taken with a good, it has not been received well. So people think that we are here as homebreakers, we are here to just continue demoralizing men and to continue just infringing on the rights of men. But we are here to support the women and to voice up for them. So for us, physical attacks has been something we've faced a lot, and also considering that spaces are shrinking, and when we continue voicing up, we see that our spaces are shrinking, so we are also intimidated to just sit and be silent of whatever instances that are happening. Yeah, thank you.
Only take the two last, who and who, like Queen Africa and Jerry, but be brief so that also we're able to pass it and give them time to respond, okay? Thank you.
Okay. I'm the convener, Africa Voice of Nature. But I have personal experience. Okay. First, let me say I'm a cancer survivor, and also I'd like to share my experience when I started Africa Voice of Nature at Githunguri. Githunguri is located in Kiambu, Central Kenya, and the place is patriarchy and the place is religious. When you are a human rights defender and you are a woman, you are considered to be not to be a wife material. You are somebody who is, you are just like an outcast. So when I started the organization, it was just me and me alone, and to start the grassroots work. The first challenge, I met with the chief area. The chief area, that time I was donating, we were donating sanitary pads. Saida came along and helped us. But the chief area, the DO then, they refused. They said that I'm not supposed to give out without their consent. But we went ahead. So the next thing that happened, there was this Ruiru Githunguri road. And the contractor is supposed to be poured. Okay, it's supposed to be pouring water along the road twice per day, according to the Revenue Act. But he never did that. So what I did, I organized people, and we demonstrated. We lit the tires, and I went back home. So the elders and the people from the community, they came along to my then ex-husband, and they told him, she is shaming us. She's not supposed to be doing what boys are supposed to be doing. So it was hard for me. And then the next thing that happened and that brought me down, it was COVID-19. There was demonstration here at the city center. So what happened? I was pregnant, and I didn't know that I was pregnant. So it was about, I was 2 months pregnant. We went to the demonstration, we were tear gassed. I was arrested with others. We were locked in Central Police, and I got a miscarriage. Again, that thing, the women, the people from the community, I was just new married there. They said, kama anaweza poteza mimba juu ya maandamano, she's not supposed to be in a marriage. So that's what happened. Others, they said that I aborted, but okay, that's what happened to me. It is not easy to be a women human rights leader or to organize a group or to lead, especially when I said I come from a religious background, a background where people believe in devil, believe that everything they are supposed to be intervened by their pastors. When the pastors tell them that this is not good, that woman, she's not godly, because there is such, in such a way, you are supposed to behave a godly woman, a very humble woman, in a patriarchy. Okay, I'm not against religious, I'm not against Christianity, but Christianity has brought many women down in Central Province, whereby most of the women, they get themselves, they are in trouble. For instance, most of the women right now, they are in their marriage, but they are not married. The Constitution of Kenya has changed. So it's no longer that if you stay with a person for 6 months, you are supposed to be in a marriage. It's no longer like that. But when you educate people, like it was on Wednesday, I was educating a group of women. But they said, but whatever God has put together, no man should separate. But I was trying to tell them, no, you are in a fake marriage. You are not in a marriage. But you see, those are the things, the kind of challenge that ones get. Also, we have a lot of things that I could say, but
Can you clap for Queen? As Tori and you all know, as Women HRD, Queen has gone through a lot, Mama Africa. And maybe for Triana purposes to translate what she said is that when she had a miscarriage, the community victimized her and say if she can have a miscarriage because of protest, then she's not a wife material. And these are the realities of many HRDs, where we organize a lot, but we don't get enough support. So Njeri, in 1 minute, you are the last one, and then we go back. Please just be short and brief. I think we have more to say, short time, but at least we have had time. Maybe be direct in 1 minute. What are your experience organizing in Mathare and being a young woman?
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. I think in terms of the shrinking civil pay, so for grassroots women, I say they come from Mathare, organizing Mathare Social Justice Center. I know most of us who are from the grassroots have had. Now we have to submit quarterly reports to the Office of the Social Developments about the work that we do. And now they sit there, after you submit your quarterly report, they sit there and decide whether you're doing
something that's benefiting the community or it's not. But we know also with this current regime that is very oppressive and does not want people to have these spaces to organize. Also, when you're women addressing women issues and LGBTQ issues, they'll say that nyinyi ndio mnafundisha watoto wa Mathare kukua, that term. Every time they threaten women kwanza to revoke their certificates, and I think that is something that also we are trying to unify our collective efforts to fight against, because I don't understand why we should be sending quarterly reports to people who are very backward, a patriarchal system that the state imekataa to change, to be the people who will be judging the kind of work that we will be doing.
Thank you, Njeri. Can we clap for Njeri? And this one also is for the benefit of also Human Rights Watch, Defenders Coalition, Kenya National Amnesty, and the rest. I don't know if you have heard about that new regulations targeting grassroots community-based organization, where the registrar has a right to choose if they can renew the certificate or not. And if you're doing immoral work, even like checking on the account, if you're doing immoral work, so ask yourself what is moral, what is not immoral. Not legally, you can get it. So there's a lot of backlash when you talk about shrinking civic space that is targeting the grassroots organizations that we need to call it out. The ones that would have come to support also mainstream organization. So thank you, comrades, for opening it out. I'm going to throw this one to Gloria. I know you work a lot with defenders and activists, and also being a woman leader within the space. How is your experience and also listening to the constituency also you work with in terms of defending? In 2 minutes?
I think I'll start here. I celebrate each and every resilient women human rights defender who's seated here and those who are outside. I have been working in this space for 10 years and above, but directly with human rights defenders it is 10 years in 2023. And one thing that has come into realization is that women human rights defenders face challenges that are unexplainable. A case in point that happened on Sunday. People were arrested on Friday. We went to the police station to bail human rights defenders out. We were tear gassed. I personally was beaten by police. But that is not the case. The case is here. We had women human rights defenders who were protesting. They were inside the cell. They needed sanitary towels. The police completely refused to give them sanitary towels, even after we have taken them. Lawyers went in and told the police, we need to give this. They completely refused. Why have I brought that out? A matter of just trying to show that the length that women go to ensure that rights in this country are promoted and protected. But unfortunately, what we have gotten back is a lot of unwantingness by the government. And major issue is repressive laws that we are sliding into. Issue of right to protest in this country is becoming, I even don't know what to say. It is now unbearable. Someone who has been charged with illegal assembly will be given a cash bail of 50,000. 50,000 because someone has gone to the streets and they have followed the law in what they're supposed to do. What is someone supposed to do at the end of the day? We have had Mama Africa saying that the only way her voice can be heard is if she goes to the street so that someone can hear her. But the same people who do not want people to talk now continue pressing our voices down so that people don't talk. What have I faced as a person who has been in this space and of course working for human rights defenders, but a bias to women human rights defenders? It is a space where unless you put your foot down, unless you say enough is enough, I am not doing this as a human rights defender, but a woman human rights defender, you will face a lot of backlash from civil society, partners, some civil society partners, but mostly to government institutions. I am a lawyer by training, but I'm telling you, on Saturday, I don't want to imagine that it is because I'm a woman, but on Saturday, the only people who were given an opportunity to speak because they were lawyers were men. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but at the end of the day, you're like, you know what? I am doing this because I am hoping for a better tomorrow. What I think we need from partners, international, local, and everywhere, is solidarity. I believe that when people come together and speak in one voice and deal with issues and attack issues together without any fear of color, any fear of race, any fear of gender, we make things move. Solidarity is key to our work, and if we get that, definitely we are going to move mountains. And then another thing that we also need is resources, and resources that are very targeted to particular issues that people are facing. For example, we are seated with women human rights defenders here. What is this one issue that we need to ensure that it is well-resourced so that women's voices can be heard, women can occupy spaces of leadership, women can be able to say that as women human rights defenders, we need to come together and ensure that as much as we are out here protecting and promoting human rights, we are doing it in a dignified manner. I really wonder to myself, even up to date, how the women human rights defenders who needed sanitary towels on Sunday at the police station, if they will go back to the streets. I know they will go back, but what will this mean if, again, they find themselves in such a state? We have a lot of work to do in this country, and especially those that are targeted to women human rights defenders.
Thank you, Gloria. Can we clap for Gloria? And thank you for always showing up on our behalf and supporting the cause and being there authentically in your own self. So I'll go to Mundia. I know you work with also Usawa, a digital space that also has podcasts. Maybe to you, what inspires you to have this human rights conversation in your podcast and feminist conversation?
Hey, Rachel.
And also your work with religious leaders.
Okay. Okay. It is okay. Thank you, Rachel. Well, my name is Nyambura. I'm also the host of Swaiba, the Audible African Woman podcast. I will speak about the podcast more because we, as a podcast, as our name goes, Swaiba is female friendships, right? Which means that we work across the spectrum. We have an intersectional approach, which means we use feminist and human rights lens, which means whether we are doing elections, we did some work for elections, and we featured human rights defenders who are running for office. When we did 16 days of activism with Pussy Power, we had human rights defenders who were also sex workers, but human rights defenders who were also LGBTQ+. We are currently doing a series on faith, freedom, and feminism, which is around religious norms and SGBV. I say that to give you a context because as a podcast, when you're doing election things, I think the expectation was that we are going to talk about, constitutional rights, which are good. But then when we foregrounded the stories of human rights defenders from the grassroots, is that we started getting a backlash. And that has continued because you almost put in a box where mainstream organizations feel like you're taking away from the gains because you could talk about women and maybe we could leave sex workers or we could leave LGBTQ+ women. And so we find ourselves pushed by the people who should offer solidarity, which is called bigger collective mainstream organizations. But it's also because we try to break the class barrier. So we will have our podcast in Mashinani, which means that we feature people like Jacinta. But before featuring people like Jacinta is that we actually go with the podcast team in Madare, right, and have conversations so that we are not setting the agenda. And the long and short of it is that we have seen our human rights defenders who are religious scholars attacked to a place where they're wondering about their jobs, right? My own mother, seeing something like the Pussy Power series, I had to explain to, she's a Christian woman in a religious space, I had to explain to the religious fraternity that, well, that's my daughter's work, but also come and tell me, don't worry, well, these things, we are talking about these things and these things are real. So, and it's also that, well, I think places like Baraza, but it's that in and all, we are very afraid every time we have a podcast because there is what you call coordinated insults, where I'm no longer in Twitter because I was reported, right? So even when we have another host, we are afraid of what that means for the online digital footprint. But as we speak now, our accounts have been suspended, right? We cannot run campaigns because we are broadcasting sensitive messaging, right? And so the question is, we know the political context, but we also do not have feminist human rights platforms. So how do we continue doing the work without, one, putting the people at risk? Secondly, I don't know the second one because it truly is, how do you actually do the work? Because so long as we do intersectional feminist human rights work, there's pushback, and sometimes that means personal danger, but it also means affecting your income streams. So it's those things, and yet and still, this is a work that should be done.
Thank you, Mundia. Please don't give back the mic, because Alan and Trana will speak the last one. I have seen Felisa arriving. Just wave. Felisa is the president of KESWA, Kenya Sex Workers Alliance, and then I've seen Wawa. You can wave, the board chair of Amnesty Kenya. They're also young leaders. So Mundia, maybe to ask you from a perspective of also protecting the civic space and the spaces that we have, what kind of support do we require from this space as a movement for you to continue protecting that space for us?
Well, I would say, one, of course, resources are usually at the point of it, but I think it's also creating alternative platforms, right? Because it's waking up, and the first thing our strategist and myself do is look at whether our podcast is still online, and it's that we have worked so hard, right? But it's that we have the fear of losing all the work, right? So I think one is, how do we create alternative platforms for the work we do? Because, I mean, platforms that are owned by bigger corporations will push back, right? And they push back for anything, right? Secondly, how do we resource the people who are doing this work so that there's interconnected, I mean, they can come for all of us, but it will take a while for, if we are well resourced, it will take a while for them to push back. So I think it's resourcing, coordinated collective efforts, but also perhaps capacity strengthening, because I'm sure there are ways we can also grow an undercurrent movement, yeah, and whatever that is, and sometimes I know working with community radios has helped. So it's those things. What is the targeted way of, because community radios tend to reach a lot of people, and they have, well, there's government to worry about. See how many things you have to think about. There's government to worry about, but at least community radios usually have the support of communities. So what are the other alternatives that we need to think about?
Okay, thank you, Mundia. Can we clap for Mundia? To Gloria, what kind of support do you require from us as a movement to continue pushing and thriving in the space that we all belong?
Thank you. I had mentioned one, which is solidarity. When we have actions that speak to the work that we are doing or have a negative impact to the work that we do, from your small space or from anywhere you work, give solidarity, give your voice, let your voice be heard, get into the conversation and say that this is the way this needs to happen. And then I think also I would pick from what Swaiba has said and say that it will need collective efforts for us to do this. For instance, right now, we are having issues of right to protest. We are having issues of very repressive laws. For instance, the family protection bill that is hanging around our heads. How can we collectively come together and speak on these issues? Because it is not, for the family protection bill, it is not only about those institutions that work on sexual reproductive rights. It will impact even resourcing of other interventions that people are working on. When you talk about right to protest, it is not only about for those defenders who are working on good governance. It will have an impact for that activist or for that person who feels like I need my voice heard, and the only way my voice can be heard is through a protest. So collective initiatives, collective efforts in issues that are geared towards protection and promotion of human rights, for me, is critical. And of course, the last one, resourcing of impactful initiatives that will make a difference to what people are agitating for.
Thank you, Gloria. Can we give a round of applause to Gloria? I also recognize Quinta Mbori, the Deputy Digital Editor, Standard Group. Karibu, Quinta. So I'll go to Alan. Alan, as a comrade, as a person who sits in power position, as an ally to women human rights defenders, what will you tell us in terms of your own contribution in ensuring that also we don't pass the mic, but we have many mic within the human rights movement?
I like that. That's a good, very good analogy. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. Oh, it's just before. Good morning still. I'm really, really encouraged to be here with you today. I mostly work with African states. I work with the African Union, with regional mechanisms across the continent. And the one thing that strikes me with the meetings that we attend, especially when it's around women's rights, children's rights, youth rights, is that there's so many men in those meetings, and they're the ones making the decisions, they're the ones policing women's bodies, children's bodies, etc. So I'm very, very encouraged to be in this room that is talking about women's rights issues, children's rights issues, with youth issues, with the people that actually are coming from that demographic. So this is really, really, really encouraging for me. So the perspective that I will bring will obviously come from that African continental level. And I've decried just the look of the African systems, the states, the African mechanisms themselves. I'm reminded in 2017 when the African Commission on Human and People's Rights admitted and gave observer status to a South African organization working around LGBT issues. And we celebrated it. We were very excited because finally we are making some progress at the African Union level. It's very difficult at the African Union level to discuss LGBT issues. And so, of course, we celebrated this, but as soon as the heads of state is that, that's the topmost body in the African Union, when they heard this at the next assembly meeting, they quickly made a decision that must be resigned. And so, already we know that on the continent, dealing with LGBT issues is not easy. And it's cascading, it's coming down to the national levels. I mean, we've spoken about the Anti-Homosexuality Act in Uganda. Ghana is currently going through a process around that. Kenya as well, we've alluded to that, thank you very much. But this is something that is really rampant, and it's moving across the 55 African states. I remember doing some research around African states that criminalize homosexuality, and I think that was in 2019, and 33 out of the 55 have legislation that actually criminalizes homosexuality. And there are various degrees of what the punishment would be. But it's the arbitrary nature in which the criminal justice system is manipulated, used, and certainly there's an area for advocacy around those issues. The other concern that I really have with the African Union is, and the systems around Africa, is the doublespeak. We are now 20 years after the Maputo Protocol. We are actually celebrating 20 years. Not too long ago, there was a whole big 20 years Maputo Protocol on the rights of women. But are we really seeing a change? Are we really seeing that in African countries, women's rights are being heralded as equal rights to all other human rights? And the answer is no. That's the reality. Your own lived experiences that you've shared here in the grassroots are the experiences of very many women across the continent, that states are not taking it very seriously at all. So when you have women representatives, when you have them at those meetings, they are basically for photo ops to show that you have you have the women in the room, they're just, it's really for the optics, and they're meant to be seen, they're not meant to be heard. So we cannot get to the nitty-gritty issues of what women's rights issues, and women's rights is not just about participation. There's so much, it's complex, it's complicated, but we're not even scratching the surface yet. We're still talking about representation. We're still talking about seeing them in those platforms. We haven't even started dealing with the main issues that women are fighting across the continent, and that's a big challenge. But we are seeing some progress. We are seeing some progress. With all that said, this year in March, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights made a declaration, a resolution in support of intersex Africans, and that is really important. And where this really touches us here in this room is that it was the work of human rights institutions, the work of human rights defenders over the years that pushed and said, when we look at the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, it talks about equality. It talks about everybody experiencing and enjoying and being protected and their rights being respected, including these intersex people. And you know, it's one of those arguments that we have. Should we separate the I from the LGBT, you know, the spectrum, and the use of derogatory words, the alphabet people? You know, we really must change it. I'll talk about that a little later in terms of how we need to change our narrative on some of these words as a way of fighting back. But you know, it's really important for us to celebrate the wins. So the African Commission has that declaration. The African Committee on the Rights and Welfare of Children are looking into questions around guidelines for states on dealing with intersex children when they are born. The situation now is that when an intersex child, when a parent, a woman gives birth to a child who's intersex, they're often coerced by doctors or by nurses. Let's do a surgery right now, and let's do this corrective thing. Let's change. This must be a boy or a girl. Choose. What should this person have? And we have heard testimonies of people in their teenage years, in their early 20s, saying these corrective surgeries have actually had an impact on their lives, because they start experiencing body changes, but what their bodies are changing is not what was decided for them at the point of the surgery at birth. So it's encouraging to see that the African systems are moving towards these sorts of ways of correcting things in the past. Then just to end, when I listened to the lived experiences, and really thank you for sharing those, I often say that the human stories are so important to get to those global policy platforms at the national level, at the regional level, at the African Union level, at the global stage. Those stories are really important. So when we're being pressed to share those, it is not so that we can have pity parties, but it is so that those stories can actually change policy. There are many people in parliament, there are many people in places of power, of authority, who have children, who have grandchildren, who are those derogatory words they use in this, the alphabet people. They have those as their children. They have those as even their own fathers or mothers who are forced because of the norms in society that you must get married to this, that. They're there, they exist. But when we start sharing these human stories and putting people in front of the face of policymakers, and that these are their relatives, that these are the people that they care about, then it starts changing from a mind issue into a heart issue. And just finally around psychosocial support. I think this is something that's really important for us as human rights defenders, that we need to really encapsulate that in the work that we do. And that's my encouragement to you, that let us find ways of supporting each other. The trauma that we experience as human rights workers is also transferable to the people that we live with. I think I heard you speak about your child and the sorts of names that they are called because of the work that you do. That vicarious trauma, that secondary trauma needs to be addressed. So what are we doing about that? And I hear that, you know, we have challenges around psychosocial support in our countries, but we are enough in ourselves to have these conversations. Yes, the professional help is needed, but even just the opportunity for us to be in these sorts of spaces to share and discuss is really important. And that's where the solidarity comes in that Gloria was talking about. And we're now talking about people-to-people solidarity. What is being experienced by you here in this room is not unique. It is the same in Uganda. It is the same in Tanzania. We had Maria speak about that. How can we support other human rights defenders across the continent who are facing similar challenges, some a little better than ours, some worse than ours? How can we find opportunities to actually network and share these experiences and encourage each other? I'm happy to see the National Human Rights Commission here, and I'm happy that Amnesty is here. I'm happy that Human Rights Watch is here, because these are the organizations that have the convening power to actually bring together the grassroots movements so that we can share these stories, and the solidarity that we're talking about is able to be transposed across the continent. We are going to win this fight. It just takes the solidarity and the energies to be transferred across, and we all have a place to play. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Can you clap for Alan? I hope you are getting some energies, yeah? Because I know, like, before we came to this meeting, people were like, what? We are tired. And I remember talking to Gloria. She was like, because she was on leave, but she had to come to the meeting. And before I give Trana for you to close, and at the same time also giving your speech, I'd like maybe to know how many founders of human rights movement or community-based organization are here? Founders by show of hands. Could you please step in front, if you don't mind? Please, want to do like a build-up ritual for the movement to keep going forward the way you have said we have to win. And I know, Zaina, I know you have been also very vocal in being advocates for the cases of women human rights defenders that have been murdered in this country. So Zaina, maybe I'll also, please step back, Wawa. Please, who else is in the room? The lady from Also Standard, please come in front. Leadership is hard, yeah? It's hard, and we need that people-to-people solidarity. So before we give now our mother in the East Africa mic to speak, and I know you have experiences that are not easy being in this space, and you're all young, and also vibrant and powerful. Maybe in 2 words, I'd like you to say what kind of support you'd require to keep on pushing. At the same time, what kind of support we can give our mother from Human Rights Watch, Trana, to be able to keep the boat and the movement alive. So I'll start with Zaina. And this is also like part of solidarity of social contract, of we are here, people to people. Because the institutions we can change. Today you'll be in Amnesty, tomorrow in Human Rights Watch, tomorrow you're in Defenders, tomorrow you're in another part, but the relationship will still move. So I want you to say like, what kind of solidarity or support you require as a leader to keep on pushing? And what kind of support can you give others and Tirana to continue pushing? Because you know on top is lonely, yeah?
So the kind of support needed.
We are doing social contracts.
Oh, okay. So the support needed, urgently needed, is resourcing, and I'm not talking about just finances, but even referral systems and pathways. If safe houses are full in Nairobi, where else can I refer my people? Maybe you support those areas. Of course, psychosocial support. In our budgets, most of the time we don't factor in well-being. We have to fundraise for that. So, and I commit to solidarity. Ngare can tell you we've done this before. Solidarity, even during the weekend, power to you, Mama, I was with you. Although online, I was not physically present in Nairobi, but I was busy retweeting and asking for solidarity from the regional spaces. And I'm grateful for those who pushed in their very own ways. Yeah, thank you.
Also the same for me. As a person coming from the sex workers movement, there's a lot of denial, especially when it comes to the women movement, looking at sex workers not like being women enough or cannot be able to make choices about their body or bodily autonomy. So I think for me, what comes strongly is the support to the sex workers movement and making a sex workers agenda a women's and a human agenda. Because most of the time when we talk about sex work, people look at sex, but they don't look at the human being. A lot of violence, most of the sex workers are being murdered in Kenya. We are always on the streets. We want solidarity of other movements coming in to work with us, supporting our agenda, retweeting our agenda, talking about murdering human beings in Kenya. It's not right. Despite the jobs or careers or genders they have chosen, nobody has a right to be murdered in this country. So I think that's it from me, solidarity, and actually making a sex work agenda everyone's agenda.
And what kind of support can we give her to be able to push it on Abia?
I think the kind of support that we can give you as sex workers is the fact that we are very vibrant in Kenya and we are really available. Anytime you feel like you want us to be there, you want us to walk the talk, we have the voices, we have the faces, we don't wear masks because this is who we are.
Okay, what we need is resources and capacity building in the rural areas, and the support that we can give you. We as women from the rural areas, we are very submissive, and when we commit to do something, we do it fully hearted.
Support that I can ask you is linkages with some donors and organizations, and the support that I can give you as Unicorn Girl Resource Center is authentic solidarity. Unicorn is there always. If you need any support, please come to Unicorn. We give you authentic solidarity.
As for me, the support that we need, because I usually do empowerment. As much as we say women are empowered, they are not fully empowered. We need a lot of empowerment, especially in grassroots levels. And also, apart from grassroots levels, at Apoju, we need a lot of empowerment because you get women like, we have women rep, but she doesn't feel the inch and the pit, ile kitu inatusumbua pale mashinani. So we need a lot of forums. Forums kama hizi pia, tuzitoe hapa, tuzipeleke mashinani, because hapo ndio kila kitu iko. The support that you can give is solidarity, and anytime you need our support, we are there. Street ni yetu, Nairobi ni yetu.
On my end, I would also say resourcing, and without repeating what Zainab says, resourcing is not limited to funding. There's a lot more with that, even as we build solidarity and collaborative spaces. I want to stress what Nyambura had talked about. So in my other life, I'm a development podcasting strategist, and as we are running away from physical activism, we might want to move into digital activism, right? But the kind of censorship we're seeing, as she's talking about, is also very smart and very clever. So whereas if we're protesting on the street, you can say, oh, I was arrested or this and that happened. On digital spaces, it's very hard to also say, oh, I was victimized because I was a woman, unless those specific words were used. But with the big corporations, something will be found. Oh, there's something wrong with your account. Oh, actually, you might have used the wrong admin. Oh, I think, you guys need to do something about your structure. So if I'm not speaking to Zainab, I'm not speaking to, all my other colleagues, if we're all working in our different silos, we don't know that we are all facing the same issue, and then at the end of it, we're actually being censored. So if we're not working together and we don't have that resourcing and, solidarity, then we won't be able to realize that it's an effort, a deliberate effort on censorship. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hi. It's a bit complicated. I'm not going to go too different from what Zaina has said. We definitely need resourcing. We need those linkages, places that we can protect human rights defenders, support in program work, and more so information. Because sometimes you can want to work with certain people or create partnerships with certain people, but you don't have a full view of the situation. And you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you are endorsing something or someone who has a history of being an oppressor. Information sharing is really important. So if we could also get information from both sides, like from other organizations and from grassroots groups as well, so that we know we are not endorsing things or people who are promoting that oppression because we are not physically there. But if we hear from you who have the lived experience with specific people or organizations, it helps us pivot so that we don't end up resourcing the wrong things. And what I can say is we can do the same on our end and hold spaces. I don't think that we're at a point where even as Amnesty where we need to do so much versus we need to hear more, we need to support more. And I can say that's something we're looking at thinking about in our next strategy. So it's also a welcome. I'm welcoming you. I'll be sharing my contacts as well when I leave here. If there's something that you feel you need to build in to the work that we do, send the email, give me a call. Rachel knows I answer calls up to midnight. So if there's something that you feel needs to be built in, something that we need to do more, I'm open to opening and holding that space for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Awa. From a media perspective, and you have seen media people getting attacked.
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Queen Tambori. I work at the Standard Group. I'm the deputy digital editor. But I'm also the first president of a women's network called Standard Group Women Network. And what we do is that we help articulate the voices of women in the workplace and position them for greater impact in society. So when it comes to media and human rights, I think I have probably two issues to raise. One is the fact that the media mirrors society. So if society is intolerant, then the media somehow tends to be intolerant. But I believe that as we speak right now, matters human rights, matters women rights, gender equality, matters, diversity and inclusion. They are not quite welcome in the media. And it is a reflection of the society. It's because society, just like Alan had mentioned, is still not receptive towards these issues. So what do we expect? For me, I think it's a lot of creating awareness and capacity building. Because it is easier for an editor or journalist to report on something they know about. If they don't know, they're going to apply the unconscious bias that they are used to in society. For example, matters LGBTQ, even if it exists in our families, we always like to look the other side and bury our heads in the sand. So how do we move? Please, let's ensure that our newsrooms are aware of these issues. They are emerging issues, of course, but we cannot run away from them. They are happening. So in terms of my support, at a personal level, I'm a gender equality advocate. I actually have a program called Her Standards that advocates for better representation and just portrayal of women. So that door is open. Anybody who has a story, anybody who has issues to raise, all you need is just reach out to me and we can have these discussions. The more we are aware, the more the society will also be aware and we can help change the status quo. Again, in terms of what we can do as the media, I mean, at least I'm at a position where I can influence. If there are resources and there's time and we are willing to conduct, training and educate people, I will be there to facilitate and ensure that we reach as many people, as many journalists, as many media organizations as possible. But again, these things take time and we need all the effort we can get in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Let's clap for them. As you go to sit down, I'll request we clap for them again. We affirm you, we see you, we celebrate you. And let's welcome Tirana to be able to give us also insights. How do you feel? And at the same time, your next step forward in pushing the movement and knowing that we acknowledge you and we see and we support you. So power, can we clap?
Time and for you to share the experiences that you've shared today. It's a great honor for me to be, sometimes reminded of why we do what we do. I think for many of us, when we run organizations, when we're worried about funding, when we're thinking about the day-to-day, when we're worried about the security of the people that we work with, when you're trying to raise kids, when your parents are sick and getting older, we forget. We forget what brought us here. And you, and the stories that you have shared with us today and the challenges that we're talking about today, you are why I came here. This is why I came to the movement. This is why I stay in the movement. And it's because I truly believe, what we are talking about as women within the women's rights movement, what we're talking about in terms of the challenges in our communities, these are shared challenges. These are not your challenges alone. These are not your problems to fix. These are ours. And, I've heard it several times today. We have to be better. No, let me rephrase that. We have to be more than the sum of our parts. We are not just a series of individuals fighting the individual fight. The disability rights movement, I look at my colleague here, Elizabeth, they have a great saying, which is nothing about us without us. And I think about that all the time. And when I sit in a room and we talk about connectivity, I think about the future of the human rights movement, and it is a movement in peril. And I don't say that to be apocalyptic. I say that because, the attacks we're talking about, whether it be in the digital space, whether it be being tear-gassed, whether it be the attacks on human rights defenders, on lawyers, we need to work together better. Because you know what? All of these attacks, the idea that the family values argument is protecting human rights, no. It is the best piece of marketing, friends, that they have ever thrown at us. It is a marketing ploy. And it is a marketing ploy to disguise what attacks on human rights look like. There is nothing about family values which protects human rights. It has become a front to attack human rights. And actually, when we think about what the people who are the anti-human rights agenda, when we think about the people behind that, one of the things that they're doing, they're working together. They are working together. They've got the same messages. One of the best examples of how they did it, and we have to do it as well and better, it's the pro-life movement. You remember what the pro-life movement started out as? The anti-abortion movement. Who wants to be anti-abortion? But who's going to say no to being pro-life? Some people that joined the pro-life movement didn't even know what it meant. They didn't even know that it was an assault on sexual and reproductive rights. We need to be as tactical. We need to get as smart. And we need to share our lessons, create these spaces, and start sharing our tactics and working together more. And we are capable of doing that. We are capable of doing it in Kenya. We are capable of doing it in Mathare and Kibera. And we are capable of doing it across the globe. Because there is not one thing that I have heard today that I can't think. I was like, oh my gosh, this reminds me of the conversations I had with human rights defenders in India, with human rights defenders in Thailand. Our struggles are global struggles. And we can get better at learning from each other. I kind of sound like there's a desperation in my voice. And that desperation is because the struggles are real and the impacts are quite serious. We used to just think that we were fighting one issue. But the whole landscape is changing for us, and we need to, and we are capable of looking at what are the early warning signs. And we just went through a conversation at Human Rights Watch where we talked to our colleagues around the world, and we talked to partners around the world, and we were talking about, you know, what are the first indicators when we start seeing human rights under attack, before we start seeing governments turned into full-blown autocracies. You want to know one of the first things that each and every region around the world identified as being the, what we call the canary in the coal mine, or the early warning: attacks on women's rights. The rise of the family values argument to attack the LGBT community. Secondly, all of a sudden, more restrictions in the digital space. Cyber libel laws that stop you from criticizing anybody on a website or a Facebook page, like we heard is happening in Tanzania. This is happening across the world. And then the next thing that we see is a pattern: they start going for your taxes. They start going for your funding. Foreign funding laws. Keep an eye out, friends. These are the early warning systems. This is when we have to mobilize, but we're already seeing it here. We are seeing attacks on protests. We need to stand up and hold the line. And I don't mean by drawing a metaphorical line in the sand. I mean we need to link arms, we need to stand together, and we need to keep pushing back on the issues which are ours and the issues which are our friends, our sisters, our comrades. And that is how we become a stronger human rights movement. You know, I heard you talking about, you know, resourcing, and, you know, this is a struggle for the movement. But it's also about educating, you know, not just talking about donors, but it's also talking about how do we move the space? How do we move the funding space? We need to be doing advocacy in these areas too. And that is something that we have access to, and that we can bring. We can bring these challenges forward. We can talk about how, you know, and we're having those conversations with donors too. Stop restricting the funding to a tiny little thing that you think is important. You give unrestricted funding to us, and let us decide. Let us tell you what our communities need. Let us tell you what our constituencies need, so that we can direct that funding, potentially share that funding, so that we can get the job done. And that is transformation. And that is transformation that will take time, but is something that we need to work on. But, you know, let me say one thing about the connections, because, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, taking to the street. And, you know, I was thinking when you were talking, I visually was remembering what I was seeing from the protests that have been taking place the last few days. These are the corridors of power. The streets of Nairobi, the streets around the world. You know, I covered I was working in Egypt and in countries throughout, and in Libya throughout the uprisings. It was the voice of the people that moved the highest levels of power around the world. And so if we ever feel disconnected from that, when you are on the street, when you are literally looking down the barrel of the gun, when we're seeing such excessive use of force by police, you know, we have to remember in these moments that this is what moves power. It is the story, it is when people mobilize that people in power get very nervous. It is when people mobilize and we can tell our stories that we can move those in power. You are never screaming into the void. It is about how we collectively channel it. It's about what we do with our voice. And that's the one other point that I want to mention, is that these aren't stories. They're not stories alone, your experiences. They are facts. They are facts. They are facts about human rights abuses. They are the facts about survivors. They are facts about the experiences and the killings of sex workers. They are human rights facts. And we live, thanks to Donald Trump and many others, in a post-fact world. So your stories matter more than anything else right now. The stories of the people we work with and for will change the world if we mobilize and we do the right thing with them. And so, you know, we're often told that we need to stop framing things in the negative. We need to start talking about the change we're going to deliver. And I agree with that, but it is a fight. A lot of people say, stop using the word fight. I was like, hell no. This is a fight. And we should be mobilized with the facts we have. We have our stories, we have our power, and you know what? It doesn't matter where we sit in this. If we are working together, we have access to power. I work for Human Rights Watch. I am the head of Human Rights Watch, and I know and I acknowledge my privilege. I have access to power. I do, because I work for Human Rights Watch, I meet with presidents. But I don't walk into those meetings with presidents just talking about what Human Rights Watch does. We walk into those meetings with often our comrades, with our partners, with our colleagues, with the survivors. And if we can't do that, then we are walking in armed with our shared stories, because they are facts and they are about human rights. And it's about proving when governments have failed. And more importantly, we need to always remember that we need to think about telling them what they need to do to fix it. Is the easy part in some ways. I feel like I've had a shot in the arm. If you could bottle human rights, motivation and fight and energy, I feel like you've just given me a massive dose of it. Again, you have reminded me. Oh no, clap for yourselves, because you know this is where the power is at. I guess I want to close by saying that, you know, I commit as Human Rights Watch that, you know, we believe our job is to present facts to those in power. And our job is, and I commit to you that within executing that job, we will work, you know, with you to ensure that we are all have access to power and we are moving that power. I know that the struggles are real. As I'm a child of somebody who never thought of himself as a human rights defender, but I was born in Singapore. And we left because my father wrote a book that criticized a government that meant that we could no longer live there. We never talked about human rights. He never called himself a human rights defender, but he was writing and talking about how government policies were having negative impacts on certain members of communities. And, you know, it changed our lives. We no longer grew up with our family. We had to move. And the reality is that for all of you, you know, I go back to what Alan was saying, is this work isn't work. I noticed, Rachel, that you said that, you know, you're called day and night to provide support to your community. That is what human rights work is. It is our lives. And just remember, it takes a toll. And, you know, I go back, I believe so wholeheartedly in what Alan said about looking after ourselves. And we are sometimes, you know, of course, we all need professional help now and then. I'm the first one to admit it. But we also do really well by building community, by building our support. So I hope that you see us as part of your community and people that can support you. My colleagues here in Kenya, me, allyship is more than a political statement. It is what we do for each other to keep us going, to keep us well, and to keep us strong. So friends, hold the line. Join arms and hold the line, because civic space is shrinking, because governments are increasingly scared of us. And they are going to be pushing back. But we have seen time and time again, the people the human rights defenders, the women's rights defenders, civil society, we know we are proximate to the problems. We can diagnose the problems, we can lay out the solutions. Our next step is to push those with the power to deliver the change to do it. But we're halfway there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let us give a round of applause. Mnafilaje, mko sawa? Situpigie director makofi. Thank you so much, Tirana. Thank you to my panelists, Mundia, Gloria, Alan, and Tirana, and everybody, because we believe this was a co-creation process, and co-creation meaning that some of the highlighting thing is that is coming through from this conversation, solidarity. And when you mean solidarity, it's authentic solidarity, not transactional. We get it? The other part that is coming to us, we're in a war. And when you're in a war, you have to fight. And we have been fighting and we have been resisting. So whatever we are doing and quoting the late Professor Michere Mugo, we're in an era that revolution, the word revolution has been dirtified, and we need to reclaim it and own it unapologetically. And that's what each one of you have been doing. We're in a place that we need to support each other and well-being for each other. We know it's tough. We know the work we do is lonely, especially for the women human rights defenders. Not that I'm saying the men don't go through the same thing or gender non-conforming people, but we're in a point that there's so much demand on our table, but let's create that space that we're able to hold each other. Let's create that space that we're able to, when we are evolving, we support the ones who are evolving. Let's ensure that we create that space of ensuring that each one of us is supported effectively, is resourced effectively. We're able to share our own privileges. Because the reality is, if we don't do that, the enemies will win. But we can't give room for the enemies to win. So I really want to thank each one of you. I know you're all busy. I've tried to keep time. Have I? To keep time as promised, because also as activists, we respect each other's time, and as feminists, and also we have a lot of engagement in our communities. So I really want each one of you to give yourself a clap. Like, appreciate yourself. Despite everything, please say something nice to someone next to you. Appreciate them. Most of the time, you're never appreciated. Go next to someone next to you. Hug them. Ask permission or consent for hugs. Or, because we're always on fights, We don't even smile. We don't even dance. We don't even be our awesome ourselves. I'm so happy to see those beautiful smiles, So I'm going to give Elizabeth the mic to do the closing remarks. But also, I've requested the DJ. I know all of us, we like dancing. There's no revolution without music. And this one, we are taking it from our sister, Maria. Maria, we are borrowing a leaf from strong women in your country. Can you guess which song is that? Which one? Superwoman. We are all super? Yes. We are all super? Yes. So before Superwoman goes, so that we're able to interact and network, and please, ensure you meet someone that you have not been in contact with. Please, ensure you network. I know, Tirana, this is also another perspective. We like spreading the risk so that next time people will not be called criminals by our government. There are people who want to take a photo with you. They put it on social media. True or false? Yeah, the youngies and everybody. They're like, we need to take our photos. So there's a request for photos that will be taken. So let's welcome Elizabeth. Let's give a round of applause to Elizabeth to do the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. So I have the honor today of doing the closing remarks, and it's mostly just a vote of thanks. Our hearts are overflowing with gratitude for the stories that you have shared, for bringing your authentic selves into this space. We wouldn't have had the discussions that we have had if you hadn't come wholly and fully. So thank you so much. I want to take the chance, of course, to thank our panelists today, Nyambura, Gloria, Alan, Tirana. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your insights, for your reflections. And of course, our host, Madam Rachel. Thank you. And because I love poetry, I have some words here. And many of you may have heard this by Pastor Martin Niemola. And this is what it says. First, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak up for me. Solidarity, collective voice, let's keep going. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we can stand, eh? Petite, we need you to show us some moves, eh? Please, let's stand. And DJ, please. At least you move, eh? My panelists, you need to move a bit, eh? This is how we also interact, eh? Petite? We need to move. Let's move. In front, in a semicircle.